With matching blonde hair, guitars, and perfectly timed jokes, the Hager twins looked like pure happiness every time they appeared on Hee Haw. But once the cameras stopped rolling, their story didn't stay so simple. Behind the laughter were pressures, struggles, and lives that slowly began to move in very different directions. So what really happened to the Hager twins after Hee Haw ended? And what parts of their story remained hidden long after the music faded? This is the shocking truth of the Hager twins. Jim and John Hager were identical twin brothers born in Chicago on August 30th, 1941. From the start, their lives were closely connected. The two were adopted by a Methodist minister and his wife, who raised them in Park Ridge, Illinois. Growing up, the twins were almost inseparable. They dressed alike, moved alike, and often left teachers guessing which brother they were talking to. Their connection went beyond appearance. Jim and John shared the same playful sense of humor and a natural musical rhythm. Music quickly became the center of their world. By the time they were about 11 years old, they were already singing in church choirs, performing at school events, and spending hours practicing guitar. Inspired by the smooth harmonies of the Everly Brothers, they dreamed of performing on big stages someday. That dream slowly started to take shape when they moved to California and enrolled in a performing arts college. Life there wasn't easy. The brothers took small roles in local theater productions and worked various odd jobs to make ends meet. Their breakthrough didn't come from a big audition, but from pure luck. One evening, while performing at a small Los Angeles club, they caught the attention of people connected to rising country star Buck Owens. Owens recognized something special in the twins, their natural charm and easy chemistry. He invited them to join his band as guitarists and backup singers. At first, Jim and John were simply grateful to be part of the music scene. But it didn't take long before their personalities started to stand out. Everything changed in 1969 when CBS launched a new country comedy and variety show called Hee Haw. Buck Owens was chosen as one of the hosts, and when producers asked him to recommend new talent, he suggested the Hager twins. That decision would transform their lives. With their matching blonde hair, identical outfits, and friendly humor, the twins quickly became fan favorites. They weren't just musicians. They had natural comedic timing and an easy presence on camera. Viewers loved them, and soon their mailbox filled with fan letters from across the country. But while audiences saw two cheerful brothers laughing and singing together, the full story was far more complicated. Behind the cameras, maintaining the cheerful and wholesome image expected on Hee Haw gradually began to take its toll, especially on Jim. He had always been the quieter of the two brothers, more reflective and sensitive to the pressures that came with fame. While John seemed energized by the spotlight and enjoyed the attention that came with it, Jim often withdrew once filming ended, preferring quiet moments away from the crowd. For most of their lives, the twins had done everything together. But as their fame grew, they started to respond to it very differently. The demands of the show were constant. Long filming days required them to deliver jokes that were funny but always safe for family audiences. Even though Jim and John were talented musicians and songwriters, they rarely had the chance to perform their own material. Their role followed a strict formula: smile, joke, sing, repeat. And over time, the routine began to feel limiting. Eventually, both brothers wanted more creative freedom and a chance to grow as artists. However, the structure of Hee Haw left little room for change. The show's formula had proven successful, and producers were reluctant to alter it. That tension slowly wore on the twins. Away from the cameras, their lives moved in different directions. John leaned into the social side of fame, becoming known in Nashville and Los Angeles as the more outgoing brother. He enjoyed nightlife, friendships in the entertainment world, and the excitement that came with celebrity. Jim, however, became increasingly private. Friends later suggested he may have struggled with emotional challenges long before topics like depression were openly discussed. Others believed he quietly battled issues with prescription medication during a time when such problems rarely received attention. Neither brother ever spoke publicly about personal struggles. They were protective of their image and loyal to the cheerful identity fans expected. Yet those close to them noticed moments when Jim seemed distant on set, only to switch instantly back into character once the cameras started rolling. As the years passed, the differences between the twins grew more noticeable. Their act depended on perfect harmony and similarity. But offstage, their lives were slowly moving in separate directions. Then, in 1993, when Hee Haw finally ended its long syndicated run, the brothers faced a turning point that would change everything. For nearly 25 years, Jim and John Hager had been familiar faces in living rooms across America. Week after week on Hee Haw, they brought laughter, music, and a warm charm that felt comforting to millions of viewers. But when the show finally ended, the steady rhythm of their lives changed almost overnight. The phone rang less often, fan letters slowed down, the spotlight that once followed them everywhere began to fade. At first, the twins tried to keep their careers moving. They performed at state fairs, charity events, and country music festivals. They even recorded a gospel album together, something they had long wanted to do. But the crowds were smaller, and the energy was different. Without the support of a major television show, the fame they once enjoyed was no longer guaranteed. John found the shift frustrating. He had always wanted to expand his career, exploring acting roles and writing more personal music. He pitched ideas for television projects, looked into solo opportunities, and even considered working in Christian television. But the industry that once welcomed them so easily had changed, and many of those doors never opened. For Jim, the transition was even more difficult. Without the constant schedule of filming and touring, he found himself with too much quiet time. Friends later said he became more withdrawn, often avoiding social gatherings and returning fewer phone calls. The cheerful spark audiences had loved seemed to dim. Even when the brothers performed together, something felt different. Their bond was still there. They had shared a lifetime of memories, but a quiet heaviness sometimes hung between them. They rarely spoke openly about their struggles, choosing instead to keep their personal battles private. Those close to them could sense the deeper questions both brothers were facing. What happens when the fame fades and the stage lights go out? Jim searched for answers through spiritual retreats, while John leaned more deeply into his faith and community work. Still, the path forward remained uncertain. For the first time in their lives, the Hager twins were unsure what the future would look like, and many fans began to wonder about another part of their story. What happened in their personal lives after the fame? Were these two famous brothers ever able to find love and build families of their own? To the public, the Hager twins appeared carefree and content, two charming bachelors who seemed to enjoy life without the complications of settling down. But behind the bright stage lights and easy smiles, their personal lives were far more complicated. John Hager, the more outgoing of the two, was known to date more frequently. Over the years, he had several relationships that never became public, but were often whispered about in Nashville circles. At one point, he was rumored to be involved with a well-known country singer, possibly someone connected to Hee Haw. Although John never confirmed the relationship, those around the show noticed how close the two seemed when the cameras weren't rolling. Their connection eventually faded quietly, like many relationships in the entertainment world, leaving behind memories rather than headlines. Even after that, John continued to date from time to time. Some relationships were serious, others more casual, but friends often said he kept a certain emotional distance. While he valued companionship, he never seemed eager to pursue marriage or long-term commitments. For him, relationships often came and went gently, without dramatic endings. Jim Hager's story was very different. He dated far less often, but when he did, his feelings ran deep. In the late 1980s, He met a woman at a charity event in Tennessee who had no connection to the entertainment industry. That was part of what drew him to her. Around her, Jim seemed more relaxed and hopeful than people had ever seen before. He even began talking about the possibility of building a quieter life away from television. Then tragedy struck. The woman passed away unexpectedly, though the exact circumstances were never widely shared. After her death, Jim rarely spoke about the relationship again. But those close to him noticed a change. The loss seemed to close off a part of him that never fully reopened. From that point on, Jim never seriously pursued another relationship. While the public continued to see the cheerful twin brothers on stage, their private lives were shaped by distance, loss, and emotions few fans ever knew about. Privacy was something the Hager twins rarely experienced, and emotional security was even harder to find. In many ways, the brothers leaned on each other more than anyone else. They had always been brothers first, long before the fame, and that bond became their greatest source of comfort. But even their closeness could not fully fill the emptiness left behind by relationships that didn't last and love that was lost too soon. As the years passed, that quiet loneliness seemed to grow heavier. Applause, laughter, and bright stage lights could not replace what was missing in their personal lives. What followed was less a story of romance and more a slow realization that time was moving on. And for one of the twins, it would run out sooner than anyone expected. By the mid-2000s, Jim and John Hager were far removed from the national spotlight they once enjoyed on Hee Haw. Their television glory days were behind them. They still performed occasionally, but mostly at state fairs, small-town festivals, and nostalgia shows for longtime fans who remembered their earlier success. The crowds were smaller, and the excitement that once surrounded them had faded. Time had clearly changed them. Their once famous blonde hair had turned gray, and the youthful energy audiences remembered was harder to maintain. While both brothers felt the weight of the years, Jim seemed to struggle more deeply. Friends noticed that the lively personality fans once adored was slowly replaced by quiet moments, mood swings, and a deep exhaustion that seemed to go beyond normal aging. He remained professional when it came time to perform, but those close to him sensed something wasn't right. There were quiet conversations about his health, the medications he was taking, and the depression he had battled privately for years. John, meanwhile, found some comfort in faith and occasional songwriting. Jim, however, seemed increasingly withdrawn. During interviews, John often carried most of the conversation while Jim listened quietly beside him, offering only brief comments. The spark that once defined half of one of country television's most beloved duos was fading. Then, on May 1st, 2008, that spark was gone. Jim Hager was found dead in his Nashville apartment at the age of 66. The official cause was reported as an apparent heart attack, but for those who knew him well, it felt like the end of a long and difficult struggle. For John, the loss was devastating. The twins had spent more than 6 decades side by side, through fame, setbacks, laughter, and heartbreak. Suddenly, for the first time in his life, John Hager was alone. Friends later said he was deeply shaken in the days that followed, struggling to adjust to a life without the brother who had always been by his side. The question many fans soon began asking was, how would John move forward after losing the person who had been half of his entire story? After Jim Hager's sudden death in 2008, something inside his twin brother John seemed to change. For most of their lives, the world had known them simply as the Hager twins, 2 brothers who were almost never seen apart. Their identities were tied together through music, television, and decades of shared experiences. But for the first time in 66 years, John found himself facing life without the person who had always been by his side. Friends noticed the difference almost immediately. After the funeral, John became increasingly quiet and withdrawn. Phone calls often went unanswered, and the laughter that had once come so naturally to him seemed to disappear. He turned down interviews, public appearances, and even offers to participate in Hee Haw reunions. When asked about it, he would simply say that he didn't know how to be only half of something that had always existed as a pair. At home, little seemed to change. Jim's guitar remained where it had always been, and their old stage outfit still hung in the closet. John continued living in the same house they had shared, surrounded by memories of the life they had built together. Occasionally, he would watch old recordings of Hee Haw, smiling at moments when Jim's humor and timing lit up the screen. But when the episodes ended, the silence felt heavier than before. Those close to John later said that grief had settled deeply into his life. He didn't seek distractions or dramatic changes. He simply carried the loss quietly. Although doctors found no serious medical problems, friends noticed that his energy seemed to fade. He appeared tired, as if the weight of the loss had drained something essential from him. Then, on January 9th, 2009, less than a year after Jim's passing, John Hager died peacefully in his sleep at the Nashville home they had once shared. He was 67 years old. There was no clear medical cause, and the suddenness of his death left many people reflecting on the extraordinary bond the brothers had shared. For fans who had watched them for decades, the story of the Hager twins ended in a way that felt both tragic and deeply symbolic. Two brothers whose lives had always moved in harmony, even to the very end.